Hello and welcome back to another evening together. Wherever you are right now, in bed, on the sofa, somewhere dark and quiet, trying to convince your brain to stop running through the list of things you forgot to do today, I'm glad you're here. Get comfortable. We're going to be at this for a while, and that's very much the point. Tonight we're going through the entire story of Dexter, not just a recap, not a ranking, not a breakdown of plot holes, the whole thing. From the novel that started it all, through 8 seasons of the original show, through the ending that genuinely frustrated a significant portion of television-watching humanity, through New Blood and the second ending that actually landed the way the first one was supposed to, through the prequel, through the sequel, through whatever the franchise is in the process of becoming now. And woven through all of it, we're going to spend some time with the theories that have grown up around the show over the years, theories about who Dexter Morgan really was underneath the voiceover and the plastic wrap and the blood slides, what the Code of Harry was actually for, and whether the thing he spent his whole life calling the Dark Passenger was ever real at all. Before we settle in, I want to be honest about what kind of evening this is. This is not a takedown. I'm not here to argue that Dexter was a bad show or that you were wrong to love it. It was an extraordinary piece of television for at least the first 4 of its 8 seasons. And even in the years when it wobbled, and it did wobble, we'll talk about that honestly, there were still things worth paying attention to. What I want to do is look at it closely, the way you look at something when you genuinely care about it. The way you might rewatch a favorite film and notice for the first time that a background detail you dismissed in your first 12 viewings was actually the whole point. If you've never seen Dexter, tonight should give you a full picture of what you've been missing and a good sense of whether it's for you. If you've seen it 3 times and have opinions about which season is most underrated, this should feel like talking it through with someone who has the same opinions or close enough. Either way, I think there's something here for the evening. If you're enjoying this kind of thing and want to catch future evenings like this one, subscribing to the channel is the simplest way to make sure you don't miss them. That's all I'll say about that. Right then, the story of Dexter actually begins before Dexter. It begins with a novel, a man who wrote it on something of a whim, and a TV production that adapted his manuscript into a Showtime series. Let's start there. Jeff Lindsay did not set out to write a prestige drama waiting to happen. That's the first thing worth understanding about where all of this came from. When he published Darkly Dreaming Dexter in 2004, Lindsay was writing something pulpy and strange and darkly comic. A first-person novel narrated by a Miami forensics analyst who moonlights as a vigilante serial killer. And the tone of it was more grimly absurdist than anything that eventually made it onto screen. It's a good novel if you've never read it. It's just not the same thing as the show. The differences between the source material and the television adaptation are worth knowing because they illuminate how deliberate the creative choices were. The Dexter of the novels is funnier than the Dexter of the show, more detached, more consciously strange about his own nature. And here's the detail that I find most interesting and most relevant to the theories we'll come back to later. In Jeff Lindsay's novels, the Dark Passenger is not a metaphor. It isn't a psychological construct that Dexter built for himself to avoid responsibility. In the books, the Dark Passenger is eventually revealed to be genuinely supernatural, a demonic entity that arose during Dexter's witnessing of his mother's murder, and has been riding alongside him ever since. Something that is not him, that exists independently of him, that chose him. The show's decision to make the Dark Passenger entirely psychological is the most consequential creative choice in the entire adaptation. Because once you remove the supernatural element, you remove the excuse. If the passenger is a demon from outside, Dexter is being acted upon. If it's a psychological construction from inside, Dexter is constructing it. And the difference between those 2 versions of the story, between the novel's Dexter, who is haunted, and the show's Dexter, who has invented a haunting, is the difference between a horror story and a character study. The show chose character study. And then spent 8 seasons slowly making the case that the character study was the more unsettling one. We'll spend a proper section on this later. For now, just note that the divergence between books and series starts at the very first question the premise raises, and the two versions answer it completely differently. Lindsay wrote 8 novels in total, the last one published in 2015, and they've all developed their own separate mythology that the show doesn't follow and never acknowledged. After season 1, which uses darkly dreaming Dexter as its general backbone and adapts several key plot points fairly faithfully, the television series parts from the source material almost entirely. They become parallel universes. Jeff Lindsay kept writing one version of Dexter's story. The Showtime writers invented another. Neither version checks in with the other, and honestly, both are probably better for it. The real-world inspiration Lindsay cited for the character is worth a brief mention because it's genuinely interesting. Others have pointed to Pedro Rodrigues Filho, known in Brazil as Pedrinho Matador, a vigilante killer who spent decades primarily targeting other criminals. They were gang members, murderers, and other criminals who had evaded the justice system. Rodrigues Filho became a controversial folk figure in parts of Brazil, someone who did terrible things, specifically to terrible people, and was regarded in certain communities with something adjacent to admiration. That's the moral territory the premise inhabits. The premise of a killer who only kills killers didn't arrive from nowhere. The television adaptation came together through James Manos Jr., who had writing credits on The Sopranos and adapted Jeff Lindsay's novel Darkly Dreaming Dexter for television. He wrote the pilot teleplay and developed the concept for Showtime. Michael Cuesta directed the pilot, and it aired on October 1st, 2006, drawing somewhere around 1 million viewers, not a massive number, but strong enough for premium cable at the time, and the trajectory was immediately upward. And here is where the behind-the-scenes decision that mattered most was made. Clyde Phillips was brought on as showrunner. Phillips is the reason seasons 1 through 4 of Dexter are what they are. He set the tone, established the moral architecture, figured out the pacing, found the register the show operated in, that specific combination of dry internal humor and genuine dread that made the thing work. A show about a sympathetic serial killer could have gone in a dozen different directions, and most of them would have been less interesting. Phillips found the one that was interesting, and then he protected it for 4 seasons. When Phillips eventually left after season 4, the show changed. Not immediately, not catastrophically, but the change was real and visible, and we'll talk about it. For now, it's enough to know that his presence was load-bearing, and his departure left a weight the subsequent seasons had to carry. The setting choice is one I find underrated in discussions of the show's identity. Miami was a deliberate decision, and it's a counterintuitive one. Most crime dramas, most shows built on darkness and violence and the hidden lives of dangerous people reach for night. Gray skies, fog, shadows, darkness as the natural habitat of bad things. Dexter goes the opposite direction. Everything in this show happens in bright, saturated, cheerful Florida sunlight. The kills happen in well-lit spaces. The morning after is always sunny. The horror is specifically located in the middle of all that warmth and light, which is where it sits most uncomfortably. You can't hide in Miami, except that Dexter does, for 8 seasons in plain sight. One small technical note that I find oddly charming as a window into how the show was made. It was filmed almost entirely in and around Los Angeles. A residential neighborhood in Long Beach, California, was dressed to replicate Miami's pastel-colored streets and serves as the primary Miami stand-in throughout the original run. The Bay Harbor Islands location used for Dexter's apartment exterior shots was the real Miami location, but the daily work of the series, the streets, the houses, the neighborhoods, was California doing an impression. The Miami you watch for 8 seasons is mostly a simulation, a very convincing one. One more note about the book-to-screen transition that I find interesting. Jeff Lindsay's novels and the television series came to represent quite different attitudes toward their own premise. The novels lean into the pulpy comedy of the situation more aggressively. There's an absurdist energy to Lindsay's prose that keeps the darkness at a remove. The show made a choice to take the premise more seriously, to treat Dexter's condition as genuinely psychologically complex rather than as an occasion for dark comedy. Both are legitimate approaches. The show's version produces better television. The books produce a different kind of pleasure, the pleasure of something self-aware about its own outrageousness. They're worth reading if you've only ever known the TV version, just as a point of comparison, to see where the story could have gone if different decisions had been made at the adaptation stage. Before we get into the story season by season, it's worth spending some time with the world itself, the people in it, the visual texture of it, the mechanics of how Dexter's double life was set up and maintained, because the show is only as strong as its cast and its internal logic, and on both counts it started from an unusually strong position. Michael C. Hall came to Dexter straight off 6 Feet Under, where he had spent 5 seasons playing David Fisher, a man whose entire existence was defined by the gap between who he was and who he showed the world. Repression, performance, the enormous distance between the internal life and the social surface. This was Hall's territory, and it's exactly what Dexter Morgan required. He didn't have to learn a new mode for this role. He refined the one he already knew. There's a thing Hall does with the voiceover narration that takes a few episodes to fully appreciate. Internal monologue as a device gets used badly in a lot of television. It becomes a crutch, a way of explaining to the audience what the visuals should already be communicating. Hall uses it differently. His narration is dry and clinical and frequently funny in a way that has nothing to do with what's happening on screen. Dexter will be at a barbecue playing the pleasant boyfriend, handing someone a paper plate with a normal facial expression, and the voiceover will be somewhere completely elsewhere, observing the gathering with a mild contempt that borders on amused, making small notes about human behavior, occasionally finding something that surprises him. The gap between what he says and what he thinks is the show in miniature. You're always watching 2 things at once. Deborah Morgan, played by Jennifer Carpenter, is the show's actual emotional center. I know that's a slightly unexpected claim about a character whose defining verbal characteristic is approximately 1 expletive per sentence, but it's true. Deb is the person in this show who feels everything, often too loudly, often at the wrong moment, often in ways that create complications she then has to manage. And her relationship with Dexter, the love that's genuine, unexamined, and completely misplaced in the sense that she doesn't know who she's loving, is the emotional through line that holds the whole structure together. When it finally breaks in the show's later seasons, the breaking of it is the most costly thing Dexter does. And it costs Deb the most. Sergeant James Doakes is the character who most deserves reevaluation on rewatch. Played by Eric King with a barely contained intensity that makes him feel constantly about to boil over. Doakes is the person at Miami Metro who is right about Dexter from essentially the beginning. Not in the sense of having evidence. He has no evidence. He has nothing that would survive a professional conversation. But the instinct is so strong and so correct that watching him through the audience's knowledge is a particular kind of tension. You're rooting for the protagonist to not get caught. You're also watching a man who should catch him be perpetually unable to. The show has to take fairly extreme measures to eventually resolve that tension, and the measures it takes are some of the best television it ever produced. Lieutenant Maria LaGuerta, played by Lauren Velez, is the most underrated thread in the show's run. She tends to get written off by some viewers as a bureaucratic obstacle or a political climber. But if you watch her carefully across the seasons, she's the character who comes closest to the truth about Dexter, not once, but multiple times, through different approaches, following different chains of evidence. The final price she pays for that proximity is one of the show's genuinely dark moments, and it lands as hard as it does because she earned the approach honestly. Angel, played by David Zayas, and Vince Masuka, played by C.S. Lee, provide the warmth and the comic relief of the precinct without ever feeling like they're in a different genre to the show around them. Masuka in particular has some of the best throwaway lines in the series, delivered with an absolute absence of self-awareness that makes them funnier than they probably look on the page. He's the character who gets the most obviously comic relief material and never makes it feel like a tonal break. That's harder than it looks. And then there's Harry Morgan. James Remar plays him in flashbacks and as the hallucinated internal voice of Dexter's conscience, his training, his operating system. Harry is technically dead before the series begins. He died before season 1 starts, but his presence saturates every episode. The code of Harry is the whole machinery. Most of his kills follow his rules. Most decisions Dexter makes are filtered through what Harry would think, what Harry would approve. This is one of the more unusual structural decisions in the show. The most important relationship in the series is between the protagonist and someone who doesn't exist anymore, except as a projection inside his own mind. Hallucinated, Harry is not Harry. He's Dexter's construction of Harry. What he says is what Dexter tells himself. That distinction becomes important later. 2 production details before we move on because they change the texture of watching if you know them. The main title sequence, Dexter's morning routine of shaving, slicing ham, squeezing orange juice, flossing, all staged so that the ordinary actions rhyme with the violence of what he does at night. Scored to Rolf Kent's immediately iconic theme, won the Emmy for Outstanding Main Title Design in 2007. It's one of the best 60-second thesis statements in the history of television opening credits. It tells you everything about the show's sensibility without telling you anything about its plot. The score throughout the series was composed by Daniel Licht, whose eerie, Latin-inflected instrumental work gives the show its specific audio texture, warm but unsettling, deeply Miami in its rhythms. The kind of score that makes even quiet domestic scenes feel like something is happening underneath them. And season 1 was shot on HD video, which gives it a different visual quality than the HD digital camera systems used from season 2 onward. The shift isn't dramatic, and most viewers don't consciously notice it. But rewatching season 1 alongside any later season, there's something about its texture that feels warmer, more cinematic, like the show at that point still had the quality of something new. And since we're on the subject of how the show looks, the production design across the original series is more thoughtful than it gets credit for. Dexter's apartment is a specific statement, neat, minimal, functional, warm in color, but spare in decoration. The apartment of someone who has arranged things the way a person would arrange them but hasn't quite managed to make it feel lived in. The Krusty Krab. I've been doing a lot of sleep scripts lately. The Krusty Krab is from a different show. Miami Metro Police Department is what I meant. The fluorescent lit, organized chaos of a real working office, which gives Dexter's secret keeping a texture of workplace comedy as much as thriller. He's hiding in plain sight, in a building full of people whose job it is to notice things, and the absurdity of that situation is one the show plays for gentle laughs as often as tension. Season 1 of Dexter operates as a magic trick. The audience is let in on the secret from the very first episode. We hear Dexter's internal monologue explaining what he is and what he does, and we later see him with a bound victim in a ritual kill room. And the trick is that none of this makes us want him caught. The knowledge that he's a killer makes us root for him to not be caught, which is a genuinely unusual position for a television series to put its audience in, and season 1 does it with a confidence that suggests the creative team understood exactly what they were doing. The code of Harry is established quickly. Dexter may only kill people who have themselves killed, who have evaded legal justice, and who he has confirmed are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He must never get caught. He must maintain his cover. And the kills must follow a specific ritual: plastic sheeting over every surface, table in the center, evidence cataloged, a blood slide taken as a trophy, body disposed of at sea in pieces. It's presented as a moral framework, and the show is careful about this, it's asking you to accept the code as reasonable enough to function on, not to admire it without question. The people Dexter is killing in season 1 are very, very bad. Child murderers, serial abusers, people who have committed documented atrocities that the legal system failed to address. The code holds its moral weight in season 1 because the show is careful about target selection. Later seasons will be considerably less careful. The main engine of the season is the ice truck killer case. Someone is leaving bloodless, dismembered crime scenes around Miami, victims drained entirely of blood, body parts arranged with a precision that reads as aesthetic rather than frenzied. Dexter looks at these scenes and feels something he doesn't know how to name. The arrangements feel personal. They feel like messages, like something is reaching toward him specifically in a language only he would understand. Running alongside the investigation is Dokes. His conviction that something is fundamentally wrong with Dexter isn't based on evidence. He can't say what precisely he thinks is off, but the instinct is overwhelming. He follows Dexter, he watches him, he makes him uncomfortable at crime scenes in ways Dexter has to carefully manage. And for the audience, watching this through full knowledge of what Dexter is, every scene between them has a specific double quality. The man who is right being perpetually unable to prove it. There's a scene in the first episode that I think about often, where Dexter crosses under the yellow crime scene tape, flashing his forensics laminate at an officer who asks if he's a cop and says simply, "No, forensics." And it's played with such ordinary calm that the gap between what he is and what he's presenting is already, in that one beat, the whole show. The slow revelation of the ice truck killer's identity is the season's main structural pleasure. The crime scenes are tailored. The killer leaves Dexter-specific messages, leads him to locations with personal significance, communicates in the specific grammar of what Dexter does at night. The audience and Dexter are trying to solve the same puzzle, and the answer, when it arrives, is this. The ice truck killer is Brian M.O.E. Zier, Dexter's biological brother. They were separated as children after their mother's murder. Dexter was found in the shipping container by Harry Morgan, adopted into the Morgan family, and had his violence guided by Harry's code. Brian went into the system after losing Harry without anyone to structure or channel what had been done to him. No rules, no framework, no moral architecture, the same starting wound, 2 days in a cargo container with their mother's dismembered body, and 2 completely different outcomes. This is the show's first and most elegant thesis statement, delivered quietly within its own plot. Dexter is what the code made him. Brian is what happens without one. And the question of whether either outcome is better is one the show has the good sense not to answer directly. The finale of season 1 is called Born Free, and it asks Dexter to make the most consequential choice the show will give him for several seasons. Brian has Deborah. He wants her dead. He wants Dexter alongside him finally, the real family, the blood family, the one person who can understand him completely. Dexter's choice is between his biological brother and his adopted sister. He chooses Deb. He kills Brian, stages the death as a suicide, and walks back into his life. He chose the family Harry built for him over the family he was born into. And the cost of that choice is the only other person in the world who knew exactly what he was. I find that ending quietly devastating in a way the show doesn't call attention to. There's no score swell, no dramatic close-up on the weight of the decision. Dexter makes it, executes it, and carries on. And the show understands that this is the correct register, because Dexter is someone who doesn't let himself feel the weight of things, or at least that's what he tells himself. Season 1's critical reception was strong from the start. The series became the first Showtime drama ever nominated for the Outstanding Drama Series Emmy. The writing in these 12 episodes is consistently confident, the character establishment is efficient without being rushed, and the moral framework of the premise is introduced with enough care that you don't feel manipulated into a position you haven't reasoned your way into. that care matters. The later seasons sometimes forget it. There are specific episodes from season 1 worth naming because the individual episodes are where the show's tonal confidence is most visible. Crocodile, the second episode, introduces us to what a normal week in Dexter's double life looks like. The balance between his forensics work, his relationship with Rita, his sister, the precinct, and it does this without feeling like an establishing exercise. It just feels like life, and the violence sits inside the life naturally. Truth be told, Hansuan Mine, later in the season, is where the ice truck killer revelation begins to crystallize. And what I appreciate about how the show handles this is that Dexter is figuring it out at roughly the same pace as the audience. He's not ahead of us by much. And the co-discovery creates a kind of conspiracy between the show and the viewer. There's also a quieter thread running through season 1 that's easy to miss on first watch. Rita Bennett's arc, and what it says about the show's attitude toward Dexter's performance of normalcy. Rita, played by Julie Benz, is a woman recovering from a genuinely abusive first marriage, and she's drawn to Dexter partly because he seems so safe. He's gentle, he's patient, he's not demanding. And all of those qualities that make him seem like the right choice after what she went through are qualities that exist because he doesn't actually feel the things that would make him impatient or demanding. He's performing, and the show never quite lets you forget that what Rita is falling for is a performance, even as it makes the relationship feel warm. That double quality, real affection, and fundamental deception existing in the same space is something the show carries through season 3 and part of season 4 before it resolves in the most devastating possible way. Season 2 is the season I come back to most often when I think about what this show was capable of at its best. It has a premise that should not work. Dexter is now working forensics on an investigation where he is the killer, surrounded by colleagues who are hunting him while asking for his professional expertise, and it executes that premise with such sustained assurance over 12 episodes that it stops feeling clever and just feels inevitable, which is the best thing a clever premise can do. Here's what happens. In season 2, divers discover Dexter's underwater graveyard in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast near Biscayne Bay. The plastic-wrapped remains of his victims, disposed of at sea as the code required, which seemed fine until ocean conditions decided to surface them. The discovery triggers a major federal investigation. The FBI are brought in. Special Agent Frank Lundy, played by Keith Carradine, is assigned to the case to lead the hunt for the Bay Harbor Butcher, a name coined by Miami Metro PD based on the dump site location. The structural irony the season operates on is pure and clean. Dexter is now the lead forensics specialist helping investigate his own crimes. He has to stay close enough to the case to manage the evidence, steer conclusions away from himself, and monitor how close the investigation is getting without making himself look suspicious in the process. Every scene where he's standing over his own evidence, offering expert analysis of his own work, has a quality of holding your breath. Meanwhile, Dokes intensifies. He is more convinced than ever that something is wrong with Dexter, and his instinct about the Bay Harbor Butcher leads him in directions that nobody else at Miami Metro is going. He puts a GPS tracker on Dexter's boat. He follows the signal to the Everglades, and there, at a remote cabin, he catches Dexter red-handed, in the middle of disposing of a body in full kill ritual mode. No plausible alternative explanation available. The scenes between Dokes and Dexter in the cage are some of the best character writing the show produced. They're locked together, one of them literally, one of them figuratively, and the conversations they have are fascinating because they have no reason to perform for each other anymore. Dokes has always been right about Dexter, and now he knows it. Dexter doesn't have a cover story that reaches this situation. So they talk, almost honestly, about who they are and what they've done. And Dokes says something in one of these scenes that sits with me, that he spent years in special ops, witnessed atrocities he can't talk about, and came back changed in ways he couldn't explain. That maybe the distance between him and Dexter is shorter than it looks from the outside. He's not excusing Dexter. He's acknowledging something, and Dexter, who doesn't know what to do with acknowledgement, sits with it in the way he sits with everything, carefully, at a slight remove, not quite touching it. They fight. Dexter is shot in the thigh, manages to knock Dokes out, and imprisons him in a large wire cage in the cabin. Which is not a resolution, it's a delay. Dexter can't kill Dokes without the death being attributed to the Bay Harbor butcher, raising more questions than it answers. He can't release him, Dokes knows, and will say so immediately. He is genuinely stuck, which is a state this show doesn't put Dexter in often, and the discomfort of watching him unable to find a clean exit is part of what makes Season 2 so good. Enter Lila West, played by Jamie Murray, with exactly the right combination of predatory intensity and genuine fragility. Lila is Dexter's Narcotics Anonymous sponsor. He's attending NA as part of his cover story, explaining away his odd behavior as addiction. And she's drawn to him in a way that's specific and complicated. She knows exactly what he is. But she senses that the cover story doesn't explain him, that there's a depth to what he's hiding that goes beyond the standard NA narrative, and she's not repelled by that. She's fascinated by it. She wants the real version, and Dexter, who has spent his whole life managing the distance between himself and other people, finds this almost impossible to handle. The relationship between them is one of the show's more uncomfortable constructions. She's wrong for him in every practical sense. She's also the only person in Season 2 who wants the actual Dexter rather than the performance. And there's something the show knows about that, which is that the thing we want can still be bad for us. The revelation about Harry in this season is the one I find most important. Dexter discovers through Captain Matthews that Harry didn't die of heart disease. He overdosed on his medication. The reason emerges through flashback. Harry walked in on Dexter in the middle of cheerfully dismembering a body. Dexter was pleased. He was hoping for Harry's approval, looking to the man who built him to confirm that the building had worked. And Harry looked at what he had constructed and walked away and never recovered from the looking. He killed himself because of what he had made. The man who designed the code could not live with having designed it. This is crucial information, and it reframes everything Harry represents. We'll come back to it in the theory sections. For now, just note that the code's creator was not a man who felt good about the code. The resolution of Dokes in the cage is the season's best structural move, and it's not a move the show makes. Lila finds the cabin through Dexter's GPS system, which she took from his flat. She finds Dokes. He tells her Dexter is the Bay Harbor butcher. She weighs this information, and she decides, independently, without Dexter's knowledge, without his instruction, that her best response is to help him. She opens a gas hob, she opens the propane valve. She walks out. The cabin explodes, Dokes dies. The Bay Harbor butcher case closes, with Dokes as the posthumous perpetrator. Everyone believes it. Lundy accepts that Dokes was the Bay Harbor butcher. LaGuerta refuses to, but can't overcome the institutional conclusion. And Dexter didn't do it. Someone who loved him did it for him. He was saved by someone else's choices, which is a different kind of luck than being saved by his own skill, and the show knows this. He kills Lila shortly after, in Paris, quickly and without ceremony, because she's a threat. It's the coldest kill in the series to that point. No ritual, no preparation, no blood slide. Just removal of a problem, and it's cold specifically because she wasn't a monster. She was someone who loved him in a dangerous way. The code doesn't really cover this. He kills her anyway. Season 2 sits at a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, the highest aggregate score of any season in the original run. I think about that number sometimes when people talk about the show's later decline, because the distance between a 96% show and a 35% show is worth understanding, and we'll talk about what happened in that distance. There are a few specific things about Season 2's construction worth noting before we move on. The Lundy-Deb dynamic is one of the better handled subplots in the series. Frank Lundy is old enough to be Deb's father, and the romance between them is handled with enough awkwardness and self-awareness that it doesn't feel irresponsible. It feels like two people who understand that it's probably not a good idea and do it anyway, which is considerably more honest about how that kind of thing works than most television tends to be. And Lundy's investigative intelligence is presented with genuine respect. He's not a buffoon the show needs Dexter to outsmart. He's a methodical, patient investigator who would catch Dexter if the circumstances cooperated. They don't cooperate, but not because Lundy isn't capable. The NA scenes in Season 2, where Dexter is attending Narcotics Anonymous as part of his cover story, are some of the show's slyest writing. He shares with the group, using his actual first name, about having something dark inside him that drives him, about feeling most alive when he's serving the dark thing. The group hears a man struggling with addiction. The audience hears something completely different. And Dokes, who is watching from the back, hears addiction, which is the resolution to his surveillance that the season provides temporarily. He decides Dexter's strange behavior makes sense now. Lots of cops turn to drugs. His guard drops briefly. And the show uses the gap between what Dokes thinks he understood and what he actually understood to let Dexter breathe for a few episodes before everything closes in again. Season 3 tends to get skipped over in discussions of the show's best work, which is a shame because it has a thesis that's genuinely interesting and that the seasons on either side of it don't quite explore the same way. It's not the most dramatic season, it's not the most tense, but it's the season where the show asks the most specific question about Dexter's interior life. And it asks it through a character who is one of the more human antagonists in the whole run. The season begins with an accident. Dexter is tracking a drug dealer he's been watching, following him into what looks like an assault in progress. He intervenes and kills the man he finds, only to discover afterward that the man he killed was Oscar Prado, the younger brother of Assistant District Attorney Miguel Prado with a criminal background, after Oscar attacks him rather than during an argument. Wrong call, wrong target. Oscar was the younger brother of Miguel Prado, the Miami Assistant District Attorney. Jimmy Smits plays Miguel, and the casting is inspired because Smits brings a warmth and charm that makes Miguel genuinely likable. Before the season asks you to revise that assessment. He and Dexter are thrown together by the circumstances of Oscar's death, and Miguel is smart enough and observant enough that he gradually works out what Dexter is. Not in a single revelation, the show earns the discovery over several episodes, and his reaction when he gets there is what makes the season interesting. He's not horrified, he's not outraged, he's excited. Here, finally, is someone who does what Miguel has always privately wanted to do: remove the people the justice system can't reach. What's interesting about Miguel, when you look at him from the theory angles we'll come to later, is that he actually has a dark passenger too, in the sense of a compulsion he's been suppressing under the veneer of a legitimate legal career. He's been punishing people through the justice system for years, and what Dexter unlocks in him is the desire to punish them outside of it. The code, as Dexter applies it, is a restraint. What Miguel wants is the release without the restraint, the power without the parameters. And the season's insight is that giving someone access to your methods without requiring them to adopt your values produces not an ally but a threat. The code was always the important part. Miguel only wanted the knife. There's a scene mid-season where Dexter and Miguel are hunting together, stalking a target, working as a team, that has an unusual quality of genuine pleasure. Dexter's enjoying it. He's not performing enjoyment, he's actually experiencing it, which is relatively rare for him. And the show lets you enjoy it too for a moment before it starts showing you what the pleasure is going to cost. What Dexter has apparently always wanted, someone who knows him and accepts him, someone he doesn't have to perform for, is now right in front of him. Miguel offers exactly that, and the friendship between them is real for a while. The show doesn't pretend it isn't. Dexter enjoys Miguel's company. He trusts him with things he doesn't share with anyone. And the season's central irony is that the thing Dexter thought he wanted turns out to be the most dangerous thing that could happen to him. Because Miguel has no code. The code was the whole point. Without it, what Miguel is doing is not vigilante justice with careful ethical parameters. It's just killing, dressed in the language of justice. He starts targeting people who are inconvenient to him. A defense attorney he dislikes, political rivals, obstacles to his career. He uses what he's learned from Dexter without adopting the framework that was supposed to make the learning ethical. Dexter kills Miguel eventually, and it's one of the emotionally quieter kills in the series, precisely because he genuinely liked him. There's no satisfaction in it, just the recognition that the partnership had to end because Miguel couldn't be controlled, and a Miguel out of control was a threat. The code required it. The code always requires something. The secondary villain of Season 3 is a character called the Skinner, who skins his victims alive and becomes the focus of Deborah's major case. He's the season's weakest element. He feels imported from a different show, a fairly standard procedural antagonist dropped into the middle of something that was doing more interesting psychological work, and the season doesn't quite know what to do with him beyond giving Miami Metro something to investigate while the main story plays out. But the domestic thread of Season 3 is lovely in a quiet way. Rita gets pregnant. Dexter proposes. The season ends with a wedding, a genuinely warm scene that the show is careful not to undercut. It earns the warmth, because Season 3 is building the normal life around Dexter, the family, the house, the stepchildren, now a baby coming, and doing it knowing that this accumulation is going to cost him something enormous. You watch it being built knowing it's going to fall without yet knowing how. The thesis of the season, stated simply, you cannot share yourself with someone and remain safe. The moment Dexter lets someone in, truly in, with full knowledge of what he is, he loses control of the situation. Connection is the most dangerous thing that can happen to him. Not law enforcement, not close calls, connection. And Season 3 is the first season where this argument is made explicitly, through a character who almost worked out, through a friendship that genuinely was one all the way until it wasn't. There's something worth noting about how Season 3 ends with a wedding, with Dexter and Rita getting married on a beach in the dark, surrounded by people who know them and love them without knowing the first thing about what Dexter is. It's a warm scene, and the show plays it warmly without undercut, which is interesting because the show knows, and you know watching it, that everything being built here is fragile in ways that none of the people celebrating can see. The wedding works as an ending for Season 3 specifically because it's the show holding its warmth intact right before Season 4 dismantles everything it's built. The happiness is real, the cost is coming, and the fact that we don't see the cost in the Season 3 finale is part of what makes the Season 4 finale hit the way it does. By the time we get to Rita in the bathtub, we remember the beach, and the distance between those two images is where the grief lives. I'd also give Season 3 more credit than it usually receives for the way it handles the question of what Dexter actually wants. He says across multiple seasons that connection is impossible for him, that he can't really love people, can only approximate it, can only perform what love looks like. But the actions he takes in Season 3, choosing to protect Rita, choosing to build a family, choosing to marry her even when the practical argument for the relationship as cover no longer requires the legal step, are the actions of someone whose emotional investment has exceeded the original parameters. He didn't need to marry her, he married her anyway. And the show is honest enough to not explain this away. There's a line near the end of Season 3 in Dexter's internal narration where he reflects on what he's building, the family, the house, the stepchildren, the wedding coming, and says something to the effect that he used to wonder what normal people felt, and now he wonders whether he's become one. It's a small moment, and the season doesn't make much of it, but it's there, and it's one of the most important things the show says in its first 3 seasons. That the thing Dexter insisted was impossible for him might be happening anyway, in spite of everything, through the side door. The normal life is arriving even though he didn't design it to. And Season 4 will take this fragile, arrived at without planning thing and demonstrate precisely how much it costs. Season 4 is the peak. I don't think that's a controversial claim at this point. The critical reception, the awards, the IMDb ratings, the way viewers and writers and people who study television talk about it nearly 20 years later all point in the same direction. But it's worth saying clearly and then taking the time to explain, because the reasons are more layered than just, it was very good. The season introduces Arthur Mitchell, known as the Trinity Killer, named by the FBI for his 3-kill cycle, and played by John Lithgow in a performance that won him the Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actor, and that I would place without much hesitation among the 6 or 7 best villain performances in the history of American television. I don't say that as hyperbole. Lithgow does something technically extraordinary. He plays a man performing normalcy so completely, with such careful construction, that the cracks when they appear are more terrifying precisely because they're so small. The gap between the Arthur Mitchell the world sees and the Arthur Mitchell underneath is almost invisible from the outside, which is exactly the point. Arthur has been killing for 30 years. His cycle, a bathtub killing where a woman is exsanguinated through a femoral incision, a high building killing where a young man is forced to jump, a bludgeoning where an older man is beaten to death with a blunt object. This is the trinity that Lundy identified and named. What Lundy never connected to the pattern because it was committed in a different sequence and matched to a different victim profile is a 4th kill. Arthur buries young boys alive. The complete cycle is a quadruple kill, not a triple, and this is a detail that the season deploys with care. What draws Dexter to Arthur initially is not the killing, it's the family. Arthur Mitchell has a wife, adult children, a church community, a volunteer program building houses for the homeless. He is, to the outside world, a pillar. He coaches Little League, he gives speeches, he is, in the public-facing version of his life, the kind of man that newspaper obituaries will eventually celebrate. And he has maintained all of this simultaneously with the killing cycle for 30 years. Dexter looks at this and thinks, if Arthur can do it, maybe I can too. He's recently become a father, he's married, he's trying to build the normal life that season 3 was assembling. He approaches Arthur under a false name, Kyle Butler, and begins studying him, looking for the mechanism, the thing Arthur does, that lets him hold both lives in his hands without dropping either one. What he finds is very different from what he was looking for. Arthur's family life is not a refuge, it's a hostage situation. His wife and children live in quiet, sustained terror of him. The warmth he performs in public is the exact warmth he denies them in private. His son is dominated into submission. His daughter walks on permanent eggshells. His wife has been managing his rages for decades. The lesson Dexter was trying to learn, that you can have the life and still kill, is built on a foundation of domestic cruelty that Arthur never mentioned and Dexter never factored in. The season gives Dexter multiple opportunities to kill Arthur early. He chooses not to take them. He tells himself it's because he hasn't finished studying him yet, hasn't extracted everything he came to learn. But there's something else going on too, a fascination that goes beyond strategy, a kind of reluctant kinship that delays the necessary action. And each delay has consequences. A woman dies in a bathtub. A young man falls from a building. Frank Lundy, who has come back to Miami specifically to finish tracking Trinity, is shot and killed by Christine Hill, Arthur's daughter, whose existence Dexter had no idea about. The Hungry Man episode, Season 4, Episode 9, set during Thanksgiving, is worth its own mention. Dexter attends dinner at the Mitchell family home under his false identity, and the episode is 30 minutes of concentrated discomfort. You watch Arthur perform the role of a kind, generous family patriarch in front of a visiting guest. Watch the cracks appear as the evening progresses. Watch his family navigate him with a precision that speaks to years of practice. The scene where Arthur's rage surfaces at the dinner table and then is immediately suppressed and covered over is one of the best pieces of Lithgow's performance in the season. He doesn't shout. He repeatedly raises his voice, but everyone at the table stops breathing. Here is a fact I find worth sitting with. Michael C. Hall was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma during the filming of Season 4. He continued the production while undergoing treatment. The makeup and hair departments worked carefully to mask the physical changes that came with his illness. And the performance you're watching in these episodes, arguably the best sustained work Hall ever did as Dexter, was delivered by someone who was seriously ill. He didn't make it a public story during production. He simply kept working. His openness about the diagnosis afterward, once he had completed treatment, was widely recognized for the visibility it brought to the condition and the hope it offered to people dealing with similar diagnoses. The season's finale is called The Getaway, directed by Steve Schill. Dexter catches Arthur, kills him, and feels the particular relief of a season's worth of work completed. He drives home, he calls Rita, gets her voicemail, thinks the message he leaves is sweet and slightly silly, walks into his house. Rita is in the bathtub. She has been bled out from a femoral incision. Arthur, knowing that he was about to be caught, traced the Kyle Butler identity back to its source. He found the house. He got there first. Their infant son Harrison is on the bathroom floor, sitting in the blood. It's the exact image of Dexter's earliest memory: the shipping container, the blood, the baby. The cycle he has spent his whole life carrying without choosing didn't break. It repeated, and it repeated through his own hesitation, his own decision to delay, to study, to learn one more thing from Arthur before killing him. And the consequence of that hesitation is sitting on a bathroom floor in front of him. Something else happens in Season 4 that I find genuinely interesting from a writing standpoint. The episode Roadkill, where Dexter accompanies Trinity on an out-of-town road trip and begins to question his father's code. In Slack Tide, Bayou Dexter kills Jonathan Farrow, a photographer he believes is a murderer, but the actual murderer is later arrested, proving Farrow was innocent. Farrow was innocent. The code failed because Dexter's evidence was incomplete. The show doesn't dwell on this as much as you might expect, but it's there. A crack in the moral architecture, a moment where the framework Dexter has used to justify everything turns out to have failed the test it was designed for. He killed an innocent person, and then he goes back to work. The code isn't mentioned in the context of this failure. The show lets the gap sit without filling it, which is the correct choice. The Season 4 finale has a 9.8 rating on IMDb. Born Free, the Season 1 finale, has a 9.6. The Getaway is the highest rated episode in the show's run, and by a meaningful margin. And Clyde Phillips, the showrunner who built this season and the 3 before it, left the show immediately after its completion. He knew where the story had arrived, and he chose not to be in the room for what came next. Looking back, that instinct was correct. Season 5 had an impossible job. It had to follow the Season 4 finale, which had delivered one of the most consequential and emotionally genuine moments in the show's run, and figure out what Dexter does next, not just plot-wise, but internally. What does grief look like inside someone who isn't sure they feel things the normal way? That's the question Chip Johannesson, coming on as showrunner for a single transitional season, was working with. And his answer is more thoughtful than the season usually gets credit for. A quick note before we get into the detail of Season 5. The Dexter we're watching in these middle seasons is not quite the same character the show introduced. One of the things the show does, intentionally or not, across its run, is slowly let the voiceover become more emotionally fluent. In Season 1, Dexter's internal narration is detached, clinical, puzzled by the things humans do around him. By Season 5, there are moments where the voiceover is openly sad, where it acknowledges grief without managing it from a distance. The evolution is gradual enough that you might not notice it on first watch, but it's there. And it matters for understanding what the show was actually arguing about its protagonist. The capacity for feeling was always present, It was just expressed in smaller and smaller doses across the seasons until it wasn't. As for what grief looks like inside Dexter, the answer is slow, uncertain, visibly effortful. Dexter doesn't know how to mourn properly, and the show gives him space to be bad at it without rushing toward resolution. He's managing Harrison, managing the appearance of a grieving husband, managing his job, and somewhere underneath all of it, processing something he can't name and can't discuss with anyone. The scenes in the first few episodes of the season where he's just going through the motions, attending to the logistics of Rita's death, making the right calls to the right people, performing the appropriate emotional displays, are some of the more uncomfortable television the series produced, specifically because they're so quiet. Julia Stiles comes in as Lumen Pierce, and the dynamic she and Hall build is interesting precisely because it's not romantic in the usual sense. Lumen is a survivor of a ring of influential men who kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered women. She was left alive and is now completely, totally consumed by the need for what happened to her to be answered. She doesn't want therapy. She doesn't want a process. She wants the men who did this to her to stop existing. Dexter helps her, not reluctantly, not as a transaction. He genuinely helps her. And the partnership between them is one of the warmer, creative decisions the show makes in these middle seasons. The season's near miss is one of my favorite pieces of writing in the whole run. Deborah is closing in on the vigilantes by the finale. She's in the right location at the right time, and she hears what's happening on the other side of a container door. She can feel the shape of it. And she makes a choice. She doesn't open the door. She gives the people inside a pass, without knowing one of them is her brother. Without knowing she's standing 3 feet from the answer to a question she's been circling for years. It's a beautiful piece of construction because it gives the audience the experience of the near miss without cheapening it. Deb chose not to know, and the show respects the choice by not immediately reversing it. The most significant thing Season 5 adds to the show's long argument is this: Lumen's dark passenger fades. After the last of the men responsible for what happened to her is dead, the need goes with it. She departs Miami peacefully, without compulsion, without being driven anywhere by anything. She's free. And that is a quietly devastating piece of evidence for the theory about Dexter's own condition, which we'll come to properly later. Season 6 is where the drift becomes visible. Scott Buck comes on as showrunner. He'll hold the position through to the end of the original series, and the first thing you notice is that the show's center of gravity is slightly off. The season's antagonist is Travis Marshall, a religious zealot staging elaborate doomsday motif killings based on the Book of Revelation. Edward James Olmos plays Professor Geller, Travis's supposed mentor, who is gradually revealed to have been a hallucination Travis was maintaining the entire time. This is the season's structural twist, and the problem with it is that most viewers see it coming quite early. The signs of Geller's unreality are there from fairly far out, and once you've spotted them, watching the season becomes an exercise in waiting for the reveal rather than engaging with the mystery. Compare this to the way Season 2 withheld information. You knew what Dexter was, you were watching the machinery of his concealment, and the Season 6 mystery feels thinner by design. What the season does give you in its final moments is one of the show's genuinely good cliffhangers. Deborah walks into a church and finds Dexter in the act of executing Travis Marshall. She sees everything. The scene is well staged and carries real weight, and Jennifer Carpenter plays Deb's moment of comprehension with a precision that makes the reveal land harder than the season around it perhaps deserves. Season 6 sits at 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. The gulf between that and Season 2's 100% is something worth thinking about. It doesn't happen by accident, and we'll talk about what the structural reasons for it were. Since we're here, it's worth saying something about the production reason for the quality shift, because it's not entirely about individual talent. After Season 5, Nickelodeon, wait, wrong show. After season 5, Showtime kept the episode order at 12 episodes per season, with later seasons running at the same length. But the writing room size and resources didn't scale proportionally. More critically, without Clyde Phillips in the room establishing the tone and protecting the moral architecture, the writing was being produced by a team that was talented, but lacked the centralized creative authority that had held seasons 1 to 4 together. What Scott Buck oversaw wasn't a team that didn't care. It was a team that was trying to serve a premise without the person who best understood the premise. The results showed. When Phillips came back for New Blood, the difference was visible within the first episode. Not because he has magic, but because the show has a specific philosophical center that requires someone who knows exactly where it is. The other thing worth naming is what the character drift looked like specifically in these seasons. The word critics use for it is flanderization, when a character's most recognizable trait gets amplified until it becomes the only trait, until the person stops being a person and becomes a performance of their most quotable quality. In Dexter's original run, you can watch this happen to almost everyone in the cast through these middle seasons. Masuka's jokes get broader. Angel's storylines become more operatic and less grounded. Even Dexter's kills get more elaborate without the episodes around them earning the elaboration. This is not unique to Dexter, it's what happens to almost every long-running show whose original creative team dissolves. The architecture holds. The people inside it become slightly more like their own types and slightly less like people. And the audience notices even when they can't name exactly what changed. Season 7 is the most interesting season of the later run, and I want to say that with full acknowledgement that it has meaningful problems. It's also the season where, for a sustained stretch, Dexter remembers what it was capable of and does something with that memory. The pieces that work in Season 7 work better than anything the show produced between Season 4 and New Blood. The morning after the church, Deb and Dexter in a car in the dark going over what she just saw. The question she asks him, "Are you a serial killer?" is the question the show has been building to for 6 years, and what follows the question is more honest than it probably had to be. Dexter doesn't deflect, doesn't pivot into an elaborate lie. He says enough of the truth to begin a real conversation. And Jennifer Carpenter plays Deb's response with an emotional precision that makes the scene feel genuinely fragile. Horror and grief and the specific anguish of discovering that someone you love is someone you didn't know. The character's process across Season 7 is one of the more credible pieces of psychological writing in the show's run. Shock, attempted denial, a brief period of trying to convince herself she can turn him in, followed by the recognition that she can't, followed by the slow construction of something that isn't exactly acceptance, but functions similarly. Deb doesn't become comfortable with what Dexter is. She becomes complicit with it, which is different, and the difference is the whole thing. Isaac Sear Coe, the first half's antagonist, is the most genuinely interesting villain the show produced after Trinity. Played by Ray Stevenson with a controlled, intelligent menace, Sear Coe comes to Miami as the leader of the Koshka Brotherhood to investigate the disappearance of one of his men, who was killed by Dexter. What makes Sear Coe work is that he and Dexter recognize something in each other that goes past the operational. They're not the same, but they speak the same language about why people do what they do. And their scenes together have a quality of unusual mutual understanding that the usual antagonist template doesn't achieve. Hannah Mukai is the season's most significant addition, and probably Dexter's most important relationship after Deb. Yvonne Strahovski plays her with a warmth and stillness that makes her feel genuinely formidable rather than merely threatening. Hannah is a former accomplice to a serial killer who may or may not still be dangerous. The season is careful about this, leaving the full picture ambiguous, and Dexter falls for her in a way that's visibly different from his previous relationships. With Rita, there was genuine affection wrapped around a practical arrangement. With Hannah, there's something more specific. She sees him, not the performance, not the forensics analyst, not the pleasant neighbor. The actual person underneath. and she doesn't flinch. What makes Hannah unusual in the context of the show's full run is that she is not a victim of Dexter's life, not someone who gets swept into it by accident, not someone who discovers the truth and has to survive the knowledge. She comes to him knowing roughly what she's dealing with. She makes a choice. And the relationship that grows from that choice is the only one in the series where the power dynamic isn't fundamentally skewed by concealment. He's not performing for her. She's not ignorant of what he is. They are, within the specific moral universe of the show, approximately equals, which makes it the most honest relationship Dexter ever has. And also, given how the show ends for him, the one that costs the most people around them the most. The conversation Hannah has with Dexter about the Dark Passenger is one of the show's most revealing exchanges. He tells her his Dark Passenger really wants a specific target dead. She asks what that is. He explains, it's the thing inside him, the compulsion, the need to kill. She says she doesn't have one of those. She's done things. She makes choices about things. It's just her. She refuses the concept of an external driver, won't accept the mythology, calls it directly, "You're not a puppet." Dexter can't accept this, says she doesn't understand, multiple times, with decreasing certainty. The show is letting him argue against a position he half knows is correct. Maria LaGuerta runs the season's quietest and most methodical thread. She finds a bloodslide at the church scene, one that shouldn't be there if Travis Marshall was the Bay Harbor butcher as concluded years ago. And she begins, carefully and privately, reopening the old case. She doesn't share her suspicions with people who would dismiss them. She builds a file, she follows evidence. She is, through this season, the most procedurally rigorous investigator in the show, and also the most dangerous person in it from Dexter's perspective. The finale of Season 7, titled "Surprise Motherfucker," a phrase originally delivered by Dokes in Season 2, and repurposed here with a very different emotional charge, brings all of this to a head at the shipping container. LaGuerta has Dexter exactly where she needs him, backed against a case built on circumstantial evidence of his guilt. Deb arrives. LaGuerta gives Deb a choice that's also a trap. And Deb shoots LaGuerta. A good detective, someone who was right about Dexter for longer than almost anyone, dies in a shipping container so that Dexter can keep going. And Deb, who started Season 1 as the show's moral center, is now the person who crossed the line that nobody was supposed to be able to cross. The show earns this moment. It has been building it for 2 seasons. Whether it knows what to do with the aftermath is the question that Season 8 is going to answer, and the answer it gives is not the one the season deserved. One more thing about Season 7 before we move on. The Isaac Sear Co. subplot ends mid-season in a way that some viewers found abrupt. He's killed by the Koshka Brotherhood after forming an unlikely alliance with Dexter, but I actually think the resolution is earned, and the reason it's earned is the conversation they have before it. Sear Co. tells Dexter that he killed Victor Baskoff, the man he came to Miami to avenge because he loved him. Not as a colleague, loved him. And Dexter's response to this information, the way he processes a grief he hadn't anticipated and a love he didn't know the context of, is one of the small, quiet moments of genuine emotional insight that Season 7 distributes through its episodes, and that make it considerably more interesting than the seasons directly before and after it, right? Season 8. Let's approach this honestly and without too much heat, because I think the honest version is more interesting than the angry version, and the show's final season has been analyzed with plenty of anger already. Season 8 introduces Dr. E.V. Lynn V.O.H. Gull, played by Charlotte Rampling, arriving in Miami with information that reframes Dexter's entire origin. She helped Harry design the code. She's a neuropsychiatrist who specialized in psychopathic personalities, and Harry came to her when Dexter was a child, not to ask whether to channel the violence, but how. The code wasn't Harry improvising an intuitive solution. It was a professional consultation between a grieving police officer and a clinical specialist, who sat down together and built a set of behavioral parameters for a child they'd already decided was going to kill. What this adds to our understanding of Harry and the Code is significant. We'll spend proper time with it in the next theory section, but the season doesn't develop the Vogel reveal with the care it deserved. Charlotte Rampling brings a controlled stillness to the role that works well, and the scenes between her and Hall in the early episodes have a quality of two people navigating a conversation neither of them entirely trusts. There's a scene where Vogel shows Dexter videos from his childhood that Harry recorded and sent her as part of her research, footage of him being assessed by his father. And watching Hall's Dexter watch footage of himself being studied as a specimen is one of the season's most effectively unsettling moments. It doesn't last long enough. The season's antagonist, the brain surgeon, eventually revealed as Vogel's estranged son Daniel, doesn't carry the weight the season needs its villain to carry. After Trinity, the bar for what Dexter's opposing force needs to be was set somewhere that most subsequent choices couldn't reach. The brain surgeon, unfortunately, doesn't reach it. The Hanamu K arc resumes. She's back in Miami and in Dexter's orbit again, and the season starts building toward a plan. Argentina. Dexter, Hannah, and Harrison will leave for South America and start over. Build the clean life somewhere the old one can't follow them. It's a domestic fantasy that the show invests in earnestly, and there's warmth to the sequences where the three of them are just existing in the same space, the glimpse of a life that might have been. But the plan has the quality of something announced in Act 2 of a story that you know isn't going to go the way the characters intend. Deb's arc in Season 8 is the season's best material. She's been drinking, drifting, compromised by the weight of everything the last several years have cost her, and specifically by the La Huerta shooting, which sits in her like something she can't digest. Jennifer Carpenter plays Deb's deterioration with a specificity that doesn't feel like melodrama. It feels like someone genuinely trying to cope with something they don't have a framework for. And then Deb is shot by Daniel Vogel. And then there's a stroke. And then Dexter is standing in a hospital room with the decision the show has been slowly walking him toward for 8 seasons. Keep Deb on life support or disconnect it and take her out to sea. He disconnects the machines. He carries his sister out to the boat. And the scene of him at the water, wrapping her, letting her go, is genuinely sad, and it's better than the season around it deserves, because Deb was the show's heart. And now the show is without its heart, and it still has several minutes of finale left to deliver. What it delivers, Dexter drives his boat into a hurricane, is presumed dead. The final scene of the series is a cabin somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, or somewhere like it, gray and cold and far from Miami. And Dexter working as a lumberjack, alive, looking at the camera. The IMDb rating for Remember the Monsters, the Season 8 finale, sits at 4.9 when you check. It is one of the most consistently cited television finales in the most disappointing category, and has been since the night it aired. The problems with the ending are both practical and philosophical. The practical, Dexter faked his death and abandoned Harrison, his young son, with Hannah, in a foreign country, without apparently much of a plan. The philosophical, the show frames this as sacrifice. Dexter removing himself because he's a danger to the people he loves, but the action it frames as sacrifice is actually just a man choosing to keep going by himself, without the people who needed him, with the consequences staying behind in Buenos Aires. Sacrifice usually costs the person making it something. This costs Harrison a father. Clyde Phillips, who left after season 4, has said in interviews that his planned ending would have had Dexter on death row being executed by lethal injection. The last shot, the needle going in, Dexter accepting the consequence, an ending that says, this was always where this was going. We did not get that ending, we got the lumberjack. And the ache that people felt when New Blood was announced, the way the audience responded to the announcement that someone was coming back to fix this, tells you everything you need to know about how the original ending landed. What I find most frustrating about the Season 8 finale, honestly, isn't the lumberjack. It's Deb. The finale has Deb die from a gunshot wound and a subsequent stroke. delivered by the season's underwhelming villain, which means the show's emotional heart ends not in consequence of anything Dexter chose, but in consequence of an antagonist the show hadn't made us care enough about. Her death is meant to push Dexter toward his own exit, but it feels, from a craft standpoint, like the season needed an emotional engine and used Deb to provide one rather than earning the engine through Deb's own story. That's the thing you can't fix in retrospect. The lumberjack we fixed. The Deb of it is harder. Here's the theory I find most interesting. The one that, once you hear it articulated, makes every rewatch of the show feel like looking through a slightly different lens. And the thing about this theory, unlike a lot of fan theories about a lot of shows, is that the show itself essentially states it directly, on multiple occasions in dialogue. The dark passenger isn't real. It was never real. Dexter invented it when he was approximately 12 years old, named it himself, gave it its mythology, and then spent the better part of 3 decades using it as a mechanism for not being responsible for what he was choosing to do. Start with where the term came from. In Season 7, Dexter is talking to his hallucinated version of Harry, and it's worth holding on to the fact that hallucinated Harry is entirely Dexter's own construction. So when this voice says something Dexter doesn't want to hear, it's Dexter's own mind making him hear it. He asks where Dark Passenger came from. He assumes Harry gave it to him. Harry says he didn't. Harry says he gave Dexter the code, but the Dark Passenger was Dexter's own invention. He remembers the first time the 12-year-old Dexter said it and simply let it go because the boy had given his feelings a name that made them seem less overwhelming. The conversation continues. The hallucinated Harry suggests gently, carefully, that the dark passenger might be just a feeling. And Dexter says with more urgency than the idea should require, because if there's no dark passenger, then I'm responsible for everything I've done. That's the thesis of the theory. Stated by the character himself, the dark passenger exists so that responsibility doesn't have to. If something else is driving, Dexter is a passenger. If there's no other driver, then every wrapped body, every slide in the box behind the air conditioning, every person who became a consequence of his choices, that's his. All of it. No externalization available. Hana Mukei's challenge in Season 7 adds to this. She refuses the concept entirely, won't accommodate it. When Dexter tells her his dark passenger really wants a specific person dead, she asks what that is, and when he explains the thing living inside him, telling him what to do, leaving him no choice, she says, "You're not a puppet, of course you have a choice." She does terrible things. She's not a good person in the simplest definition of that phrase. And she doesn't have a dark passenger, it's just her. She knows what she wants, she acts on it, and she doesn't need a mythology to process the accountability. Dexter cannot accept this. He says, "You don't get it," 3 times in the conversation, with slightly less conviction each time. And the show knows this. The decreasing conviction is the point. The behavioral evidence across the series is consistent with the theory rather than against it. The dark passenger is described as an external compulsion, something that arrives independently, demands to be satisfied, and leaves Dexter with no real choice in the matter. But look at how the urge actually operates. It intensifies when Dexter is stressed, when his cover's threatened, when relationships are in crisis, when he's backed into a corner, or when something outside his control has destabilized the careful architecture of his double life. That's not the behavior of an autonomous external force. That's a coping mechanism that involves violence. It's anxiety expressed as killing. The mythology was built on top of a pattern that was always emotional rather than metaphysical. New Blood provides the most definitive behavioral evidence. Dexter spends approximately 10 years in Iron Lake without killing anyone. He suppresses the compulsion, not through the code, not through channeling it towards sanctioned targets, but through a quiet life that gives him other things to occupy the space. He becomes Jim Lindsay. He bowls. He runs in the snow. He maintains a relationship. He goes 10 years. If the dark passenger were a genuine autonomous presence with its own agenda and its own existence independent of Dexter's choices, this decade of silence shouldn't be possible. It is possible. It ends when the white deer gets shot, when blood touches him again, when the old pattern is reactivated by an external trigger rather than arriving on its own, which suggests the passenger was always waiting for a reason, not creating one. The theory's conclusion is a genuinely uncomfortable one. Dexter was never possessed, was never controlled. Every kill was a choice made by a person who had very good reasons or reasons that felt good enough, and a story he built for himself to make the choices feel like something other than choices. The dark passenger is a permission structure. It's the thing that says, not my fault. The code is the thing that says, but moral anyway. Together, they're a complete system for living with what you are without being accountable for it. What that does to the show's moral texture is worth sitting with, because if the passenger isn't real, then every time the show asks you to feel sympathy for the weight of Dexter's compulsion, the burden he carries, the thing he didn't ask for, the nature he didn't choose, it's asking you to feel sympathy for a story a person told himself, which is actually more human, more recognizable, and in some ways more unsettling than the alternative. There's a version of this theory that's too harsh, and I want to avoid it. The claim isn't that Dexter was lying about everything or that the difficulty of his condition was purely performative. He had a traumatic early childhood. 2 days in a cargo container with his murdered mother at about 3 years old is not a trivial thing, and its effects on psychological development are real and documented. The compulsive violence is real. The difficulty is real. What the theory questions is not the experience, but the framing, the claim that the violence is external, autonomous, not him. That's the part that can't survive scrutiny. There's a reading of New Blood where Harrison shooting Dexter is, among other things, a son, refusing to allow his father to use the dark passenger logic one more time. Dexter is telling Harrison essentially that he had to kill Logan. The passenger required it, self-preservation required it, the machinery required it. And Harrison's response is to say, no, I see what you are. I know what you chose. And he ends it not as a monster killer, but as someone who won't be recruited into the story. This one requires some care to state properly, because the wrong version of it sounds like simple villain attribution. Harry was bad, Harry is to blame, Harry's the monster, and that's not the argument. The argument is more specific and I think more interesting. The argument is that Harry's love was not enough to substitute for better answers that he didn't have, and that the code he built in the absence of those answers did something more complicated than help. Here's what Harry actually did. He found a traumatized 2-year-old who had been trapped in a cargo container with his mother's dismembered body. He adopted that child. He loved him. Genuinely, that part is not in dispute. And when that child began exhibiting signs of violent compulsion, killing the neighbor's dog, burying small animals, displaying behaviors that Harry could see were heading somewhere dark, Harry made a decision. He would not seek institutional psychiatric help. He instead taught Dexter the code, even though Dexter had been born in his mother's blood and would one day kill him. He would design a solution with Dr. E.V. Lin VOH Gull to manage Dexter's violent impulses. He consulted E.V. Lin VOH Gull, a neuropsychiatrist, and together they designed the code. And then Harry implemented it, shaping Dexter's violence, giving it rules, giving it targets, giving it the moral infrastructure that would let Dexter function without destroying himself or being caught. The question the show eventually raises through Vogel, through Deb, through the hallucinated Harry and his own internal dialogues, is whether Harry was responding to who Dexter already was or whether he was creating it. The training, the code, the framework that told a child his violent impulses were not only manageable but purposable. Did it channel something that was already inevitable? Or did it confirm and deepen something that might have resolved differently without the confirmation? We can't answer this. The show has the good sense not to try, but it asks the question clearly enough that dismissing it would be dishonest. Harry's suicide is the evidence that makes the theory most compelling. He did not die of heart disease. He overdosed on his medication deliberately, and the reason becomes clear in flashback. He walked in on Dexter dismembering a body. Dexter was cheerful. He was looking to Harry for approval. He wanted the man who built him to see that the building was working. And Harry looked at what he had made, at the cheerful, competent, thorough dismemberment, at the son seeking validation for the violence Harry had trained him toward and could not live with it. He died of having built a thing he couldn't bear to have built. This is not the behavior of a man who was certain he did the right thing. This is the behavior of a man who knew at the end that he had done something irreversible and couldn't justify it to himself. The code was supposed to make Dexter functional. Harry saw it make Dexter enthusiastic, and that was the thing he couldn't absorb. Season 8's Vogel revelation adds another layer. Harry didn't arrive at the code alone. He brought in professional consultation not to ask whether to build the code, but how. The code is a collaborative document designed between a grieving police officer and a clinical specialist, who both decided independently that management was the answer rather than treatment or disclosure or any of the harder alternatives, which means the code was always partly about what Harry needed as much as what Dexter needed. A system that kept the problem contained was a system that let Harry keep his son. New Blood makes the accusation explicitly through Deb's hallucination. This is Dexter's own conscience speaking. What Harry did to you was child abuse, teaching you to become a serial killer and how to get away with it. Dexter doesn't fully accept this, but he doesn't dismiss it either, and the fact that his own constructed version of Deb says it, the version he built from his love for her, from his understanding of what she valued, suggests he's been thinking it for a while. The theory has a humane limit that's worth honoring. Harry had no obviously good options. What do you do with a child who's already exhibiting violent compulsions, who has survived a trauma that would overwhelm most adults, who's heading towards something dark and doesn't have the language to explain himself? The psychiatric options available in the late 1970s and early 80s were imperfect and involved a loss of control that Harry may not have been wrong to fear. The code was an improvisation made from love and from limited alternatives. It just happened to be an improvisation that shaped a child toward killing people, which is a fairly significant consequence to have to account for. The real villain argument made properly is not that Harry intended harm. It's that Harry's love was more about keeping Dexter than about getting Dexter help. That the choice to design the code rather than seek outside assistance was, at least partly, a choice to keep the family together rather than blow it open. And that this choice, made with love, made with the best available intentions, produced something neither Harry nor Dexter ever fully came to terms with. He was the first person in Dexter's life who should have been honest about what Dexter needed. He chose a different kind of honesty, and everything that follows flows from that choice. Here's a detail that adds to the picture. The code, as Dexter knows it, has two fundamental rules: only kill killers and never get caught. The second rule is stated first in practice and enforced more strictly. The first rule provides the moral cover. The second rule provides the survival mechanism. If you look at the code from Harry's perspective, a father trying to keep his son out of an institution, out of prison, alive and free, the emphasis is correct. But from the standpoint of genuine ethical architecture, the priority ordering is telling. Don't get caught is primary, only kill killers is secondary. The moral constraint exists inside the operational one, not the other way around. Harry built safety for Dexter and then built ethics inside that, which means when the code is stress tested, when following the only kill killers rule would endanger the never get caught rule, the operational rule wins. And in the show, it does, multiple times. Dexter. New Blood was announced in October 2020, and Showtime were unusually direct about the context. This limited series was conceived to give the series a proper ending. Clyde Phillips came back as showrunner, the person who had understood the show best during its original run, and the production set up in the cold of New England, in a village called Shelburne Falls in Massachusetts, which stood in for the fictional Iron Lake, New York. The choice to bring Phillips back is the most important creative decision the revival made. It's not just about competence or familiarity with the character. It's about what Phillips understood that the post-season 4 showrunners did not. That the show is most interesting when it's taking its own moral questions seriously, when the code isn't decorative but load-bearing, when the consequences of Dexter's choices accumulate rather than reset. New Blood operates from that understanding from its first episode. The premise is a 10-year jump. Dexter has been living in Iron Lake as Jim Lindsay, a name borrowed from Jeff Lindsay, a small acknowledgement of the novel series that started everything. He works at a sporting goods store. He has a stable relationship with Angela Bishop, the local police chief, played by Julia Jones. He's been invited into the community. He goes bowling. He runs in the snow. He hasn't killed anyone in nearly a decade. And the white deer he keeps seeing on his morning runs has become, in his internal logic, something like a symbol of the life he managed to build, something pure and uncontaminated that he keeps not touching. The inciting event is elegant in its simplicity. Matt Caldwell, the dissolute and casually cruel son of local businessman Kurt Caldwell, shoots the white deer and sprays Dexter with its blood. That's all it takes. 10 years of suppression ends in one image, one moment of blood connecting his skin. The kill ritual resumes that night in his shed with Matt on a table covered in plastic, and Dexter internally noting that he's a bit out of practice. Harrison arrives in the second episode, having tracked down his father through a letter to Hannah and social media. The search methodology is, I find this genuinely charming, entirely mundane. He's a teenager, he's been in the foster care system since Hannah died, and he arrived at the series having lost his father, then his stepmother, then the woman who was raising him, and bounced through a system that wasn't designed to hold the kind of specific damage he was carrying. Their reunion is handled with care. Dexter initially denies being who Harrison knows he is, gives him cash, and tries to send him out of town. Then watches him walk away through the window, then thinks about it. And then, in New Blood, Harrison changes his mind and goes to find Dexter. The sequence doesn't rush, and the show trusts the pause between denial and change of mind to mean something. Kurt Caldwell is a different kind of villain than the show had previously built. He's not Trinity, not a decade-spanning predator with mythological scope and theatrical detail. He's a local, a pillar of the community, someone who exploits the vulnerability of young women passing through a small town, runways, hitchhikers, people. The system is less likely to notice going missing. Clancy Brown plays him with a genial menace that makes the warmth he displays in public feel exactly as unsettling as it should. He is mundane evil, which is in some ways more disturbing than operatic evil. The Deb hallucination is the best use of the hallucinatory mechanic in the franchise's history. Jennifer Carpenter was brought back for New Blood not as a ghost or a warm memory, but as a critical presence. Dexter's conscience doing the work his conscience needs to do and refusing to be gentle about it. You selfish psycho, you emotionally handicapped, crazy fuck. This is not the Deb who loved Dexter uncritically. This is the Deb who loved him and knew what he was and is no longer available to be gentle about it because she's dead, and she's dead because of choices he made. The decision to use Deb rather than Harry as the hallucination voice is the most important tonal decision New Blood makes. Harry was a comfort, he was the system, he was justification built in. Deb is accountability. When Dexter hallucinates Harry in the original series, Harry's presence is generally regulatory. Here's what you need to do, here's what the code requires, here's what I think of this. When Dexter hallucinates Deb in New Blood, she doesn't offer the code. She offers truth. And the truth she offers is specifically about what Dexter has cost the people who loved him, not what he needs to do next to stay safe. That shift, from the operational voice to the relational one, is what makes the New Blood hallucination feel different from everything that came before it. Harry was Dexter managing himself. Deb is Dexter finally, imperfectly, attempting to account for himself. What the season is really about, underneath the Kurt Caldwell investigation and the Harrison reconnection and the Angela discovering the truth thread, is the question of inheritance. What do you pass to your children, and is it your fault that you passed it on? Harrison has a dark streak, a straight razor, an incident at school involving another boy's blood, a violence that sits in him quietly until it doesn't. And Dexter, watching this, has to decide whether to handle it the way Harry handled him, build a framework, channel the violence, give it rules and targets, or whether to try something Harry never tried: honesty. The season's ending is the most consequential thing the franchise has done since the season 4 finale, and it earns its weight. Dexter kills Logan, a genuinely good cop, someone who is just doing his job, someone who is not a monster by any definition the code provides, in order to escape custody. Harrison finds out. Harrison, who has been building toward a version of his father he can live with, discovers that the self-preservation instinct overrides the code when the two conflict, that Dexter will kill an innocent man to keep going. In the snow, in the dark, Harrison has a rifle. Dexter tells him to take the safety off. "You did good, he says after Harrison pulls the trigger. This works where the original finale didn't for a specific reason. This is consequence rather than escape. In 2013, Dexter drove his boat into a hurricane and started a new life. In 2022, Dexter's choices arrive at a person who loves him, and that person stops them. The cycle that began in a shipping container in Miami, the blood, the inherited violence, the child sitting in it, closes here, in snow instead of blood, but with the same basic shape. Harrison is not the monster, he is the ending of one. Angela's decision to let Harrison go, to give him cash and clear the scene and send him away from Iron Lake, is the episode's grace note. It's a kind act that the show earns by making Angela a person with depth, rather than a plot function. New Blood became the most watched series in Showtime's history during its broadcast run, drawing around 8 million viewers per week across all platforms. The audience that felt shortchanged in 2013 came back. What they found was better than what they'd been given. Not perfect, the middle episodes sag somewhat, and some plot threads in the back half feel underwritten, but genuinely better. And that counts for something. One thing I want to give the season specific credit for is the way it handles Harrison's relationship to violence without confirming or denying the hereditary reading. He does things during the season, the razor, the school incident, that look like the same pattern starting. But the show is careful not to close the question. Harrison is also someone who grew up without stability in a series of foster placements, who learned very early that the world didn't protect him. His violence might be inherited, it might be adaptive, it might be both. And by the end of the season, when he shoots Dexter, the show has constructed an act that can be read as inherited impulse or moral clarity, and declines to declare which it is. Harrison himself doesn't know. He just knows he couldn't watch his father walk away from one more thing. The season also gives Iron Lake itself a texture that rewards attention. It's a small community where everyone knows everyone, which means every choice Dexter makes has immediate social consequences he has to manage. With Angela, with the search parties that show up at his cabin, with the wrestlers, with the diner regulars. The intimacy of a small town is more dangerous for him than the anonymity of Miami, which is an interesting reversal of what the move north was supposed to provide. He ran from the city because it was crowded and watched. He arrived somewhere that watches differently. Since New Blood, the Dexter universe has expanded into territory that a decade ago would have seemed unlikely. A prequel, a sequel, an additional sequel already in development, and an entirely separate spin-off announced around one of the franchise's most beloved villains. It's a lot to keep track of, so let's go through it with a bit of care. Dexter, Original Sin premiered in December 2024 on Paramount Plus with Showtime. It's a prequel series set in 1991 Miami, bright, warm, pre-digital Miami, long before the show's 2006 timeline, following a young Dexter as he makes the transition from forensic student to active killer under Harry's guidance. Patrick Gibson plays young Dexter, Christian Slater plays Harry, and Molly Brown plays a younger Deb. And Michael C. Hall provides the inner monologue voiceover, the adult Dexter narrating his own origin from somewhere in the future. That framing device is the most interesting structural decision in the series. You're watching Patrick Gibson on screen, but you're hearing Michael C. Hall's voice annotating what you're watching. It creates a peculiar doubling. The young Dexter who did these things in the moment, and the older Dexter who survived them long enough to look back. Which invites the question, where in the timeline is the older Dexter narrating from? What does he know looking back that the 1991 version didn't? The series doesn't fully answer this, and it's probably wiser not to. Original Sin covers Dexter's first kills under sanction. The first is Nurse Mary, a hospital employee who has been administering lethal doses to patients in Harry's hospital, someone Dexter has identified through careful observation and confirmed as guilty before acting according to Harry's code. It's a messier, more uncertain kill than the polished ritual of 2006. They are the earrings he takes as a trophy, which his sister Deb later discovers and tries to sell at a pawn shop, before instead giving them to her friend Sophia, not knowing what Durst they are. The code's early architecture being built in real time rather than remembered as a completed system. What Original Sin is doing, at its most interesting, is showing you the crafting. The 2006 Dexter is already accomplished, already has the plastic, the ritual, the blood slide, the precise methodology. The 1991 Dexter is figuring out what works. He makes mistakes. He keeps things he shouldn't. His judgment about targets is less certain. Watching the expert in the process of becoming one is a specific kind of dramatic pleasure that the original series couldn't offer, because it was always looking at the finished product. The series was canceled in August 2025, despite an earlier announcement of renewal. This is an abrupt end for something that was doing interesting work, and it's a shame. The stated reasons appear to involve platform consolidation and budget priorities rather than creative failure, but regardless of the reason, 10 episodes is what exists. 10 very good episodes that fill in the franchise's origin in ways worth watching. One thing Original Sin does that no other part of the franchise quite manages. It shows you Harry as a living person rather than a ghost or a projection. In the original series, James Remar plays Harry in flashbacks, but the flashbacks are Dexter's memories, filtered, selectively recalled, the version of Harry that Dexter constructed. Christian Slater plays a Harry who exists before Dexter's recollection of him, in the context of his own life, his marriage, his complicated history with Laura Moe-Zer, his anxieties about the choices he's making. This Harry is less certain than the hallucination. He's a man making decisions in real time without knowing how they'll turn out. Slater brings a warmth and a visible doubt to the role that the hallucinated Harry couldn't carry. It's useful to see the original before Dexter finished editing him. Dexter. Resurrection premiered in July 2025, and it opens by answering the New Blood cliffhanger in the most direct possible way. Dexter survived the gunshot wound. He was resuscitated in an emergency room. He's alive. Whether this retroactively diminishes what Harrison did in New Blood's finale is a question the franchise has to earn its way past. And from what the series does with its first season, it appears to be aware of the problem. The show follows Dexter to New York City, where Harrison went after leaving Iron Lake. And the central dynamic of the season is Dexter trying to find his son while grappling with what happened between them and what it revealed about both of them. New antagonists arrive. Uma Thurman and Peter Dinklage join the main ensemble in significant roles. Angel returns. And James Remar comes back as a Spectral Harry, a post-New Blood version of the hallucination, which necessarily carries a different weight than the versions we've seen before. The Resurrection premiere episode drew 3.1 million cross-platform viewers globally in its opening weekend, setting the record for Showtime's most streamed premiere on Paramount+. A second season was ordered in October 2025. The franchise appears to have found a sustainable audience in this newer configuration. And separately from Resurrection, an untitled prequel series has been announced that will focus on Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, in the 1970s, exploring his early kills and what made him what he became. This is either a fascinating proposition or a significant risk, depending on how much you think Trinity's power came from what we didn't know about him. The argument for John Lithgow's performance in Season 4 created one of the richest character portraits in television, and the backstory implicit in the character is genuinely interesting. The argument against part of what made Arthur Mitchell terrifying was the depth of his mystery. And explaining the mystery thoroughly might not leave what made the mystery compelling intact. We'll find out. Now, since we're talking about the show's expanding universe, if you're enjoying this evening and want to make sure you're here for future ones, subscribing helps more than you might think. It keeps the channel going and means evenings like this, one keep being possible. A few things about the show's production and cultural footprint that change the texture of watching it, if you come back to the series with them in mind. Michael C. Hall and Jennifer Carpenter, who played adopted brother and sister on screen, were married in real life from 2008 to 2011. They met on set during production of the original series, became involved, married during Season 3, and divorced during Season 5. They filmed Seasons 4, 5, and 6 together during the arc of their actual marriage and then its end, and they did so with what appears to have been genuine professional commitment. Neither party made it a public story during the run. The performances didn't visibly suffer, and by all accounts, the cast and crew navigated it with a care that protected the work. Knowing it while watching those seasons doesn't change what's on screen, but it adds a layer of context to scenes between Dexter and Deb, particularly the more emotionally loaded ones, that is hard to fully set aside once you're aware of it. Hall never won the Emmy for his work on Dexter, despite receiving 5 nominations for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. He won the Golden Globe and the Screen Actors Guild Award in 2010, which most people who care about the show would agree was the right year for the recognition. It was the Trinity season, Hall's best sustained work. John Lithgow won the Emmy for playing Arthur Mitchell in the same year, which was an unambiguous correct decision. The show overall accumulated more than 100 award nominations across its run and won approximately 32 of them, including a Peabody Award and consecutive AFI recognitions in 2006 and 2007 as one of the 10 best television programs of the year. Here's a production detail I find strangely charming as a window into a now-gone era of media consumption. At some point during the show's original run, the Dexter DVD box set was described as the most rented physical disc set in Netflix's history. This was the Netflix of mail-order DVDs era, rather than the streaming service it became, and it's a striking indication of how widely people were consuming the show outside of its original linear broadcast. People were working through seasons at their own pace on discs they received in envelopes. That relationship with the show, deliberate, self-paced, chosen, probably shaped the audience's investment in ways that watching it in passing on a streaming platform wouldn't. During the 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike, Showtime licensed edited versions of Season 1 to CBS for broadcast on free network television. The Parents Television Council mounted a public protest, arguing that a sympathetic serial killer had no business on a national broadcast network accessible to children. The protest didn't prevent the broadcast, but the controversy it generated is worth noting as an index of what the show was doing culturally. It was pushing against a boundary, and people knew it, and some of them were uncomfortable, and the show went on airing anyway. the real-world impact on criminal cases, is the uncomfortable piece of the show's legacy that doesn't get discussed often because there's no clean way to discuss it. The series has been cited in several high-profile cases where perpetrators claim to have drawn methodology or inspiration from Dexter Morgan, the use of plastic, the framing of violence within a code of conduct, the vigilante self-justification. A television drama cannot be held responsible for how disturbed individuals interpret and apply its content. But it's worth acknowledging that the show's specific project, asking the audience to identify with a serial killer, to understand his logic from the inside, to root for his continued freedom, has real effects on real audiences, and not all of those effects are the ones the show intended. What Dexter did to the medium is easier to measure and genuinely significant. The morally ambiguous anti-hero as a prestige television protagonist existed before Dexter. Tony Soprano was there first, and several others were in the vicinity. But Dexter pushed the premise further in a specific direction. It asked the audience to maintain simultaneous awareness of a character's humanity and the full weight of what they were doing, not sequentially, but at the same time in the same scene. To hold the contradiction open rather than resolving it into either pure sympathy or pure condemnation. That cognitive and emotional mode, watching someone do something terrible and understanding it and not excusing it and not quite being able to stop watching, is now a standard mode of television engagement. We learned it somewhere. Dexter was part of the teaching. Surprise, motherfucker, has a separate life now. Doak's line from season 2, delivered with an intensity that was always a little bit funny even before it became explicitly a comic vehicle, has been extracted from its context and lives independently on the internet as a reaction phrase for mild to moderate surprises. It's been remixed, captioned, applied to situations that have nothing to do with Showtime premium cable dramas about a vigilante serial killer. This is what happens when a line from a television show becomes accurate shorthand for a human experience. The line outgrew the show. The show is better remembered by many people through the line than through any episode title. Daniel Licht, who composed the score for the original series and associated projects, died in 2017. His eerie, Latin-influenced instrumental work was foundational to the franchise's audio identity. The specific quality of unease the show's quiet scenes carried, the way even domestic moments felt like something was happening underneath them. Pat Irwin took over composing duties for Dexter, Resurrection. The transition is one of those production changes that attentive viewers notice, even if they can't immediately name what's different. Something I think deserves mentioning before we close out the behind-the-scenes material: the show's relationship to its own violence. Dexter is not a particularly graphic show by premium cable standards of its era. The Sopranos and Oz were doing things considerably more graphic on a different premium cable network, and The Wire was doing more graphic work on that same competitor. What Dexter is precise about is the aesthetic of violence. The plastic sheeting, the surgical tools laid out in order, the blood slide taken methodically, the ritual quality of the whole operation. The show is specific about procedure rather than explicit about gore, which turns out to be more psychologically interesting than the alternative. The ritual is the horror. Once you understand it as ritual, as something Dexter has done enough times to have refined into a procedure, the individual acts matter less than the accumulated weight of the practice. That's a more disturbing place to land than shock value would be, and it's a deliberate choice by the production design team and directors across the run. The question of whether Dexter influenced how television subsequently depicted anti-heroes is mostly settled in the affirmative by critical consensus at this point. Breaking Bad followed in 2008 and took the anti-hero format in a completely different direction. Walter White, as someone the audience watches transform into something worse rather than meeting already transformed. Hannibal, which premiered in 2013, took the aestheticization of violence much further in a more surrealist direction. But the DNA of Dexter, rooting for someone the news would call a monster, maintaining dual moral accounting, finding a man you like inside a man who does terrible things is present in all of it. And that, more or less, is Dexter. The whole thing, from a 2004 novel to a franchise with new television series in development as of this year, with everything in between, the shipping containers and the kill rooms and the blood slides and the Miami sunlight and the cold of Iron Lake and the eventual snow. What I keep coming back to, sitting with all of it, is what the show was actually arguing about underneath everything. Underneath the voiceover and the plastic wrap and the procedural police drama and the seasonal villain and the bloodslide box kept behind the air conditioning unit like a quiet museum of decisions. Underneath all the specific craft of it, the argument, I think, is about the gap between the story we tell about ourselves and the thing we actually are. Dexter built an elaborate architecture for his own life. He named something, gave it a mythology, followed rules he constructed to make the thing feel moral, and maintained for decades the useful fiction that there was a distinction between him and the dark passenger. And the show, at its best, in its clearest seasons, was slowly, carefully, without announcing itself, dismantling that architecture. Not to condemn him, not to excuse him, just to look at what was underneath. The people who love this show love it because Dexter is doing, in an extreme register, something recognizably human. We all have stories about why we do what we do. We all have names for the parts of ourselves we don't entirely want to own. Most of us don't have a dark passenger in any literal sense, but most of us have something, some habit or pattern or choice we've found a way to frame as something other than a choice. The dark passenger is just a particularly dramatic version of a very common psychological arrangement. And then there's the question of what Dexter actually felt. In the first episode, he tells you he doesn't know what made him the way he is, that people fake a lot of human interactions, but he feels like he fakes them all and fakes them very well. The show's answer to whether that's true, delivered across 8 seasons of television and counting, seems to be: you felt more than you thought you did. The grief for Deb was real. The love for Harrison was real. The reluctance to pull the trigger in the snow was real. The capacity for feeling was there all along. It just had to find its way through the layers of story he'd built on top of himself. That, I think, is what makes the character last. Not the kills, not the ritual, not the aesthetic of the blood slides in their little box. It's the question of whether someone who believes they don't feel things can be wrong about themselves for an entire lifetime, and what happens if they are. And here's the thing about that question that I find most worth sitting with in a quiet moment. The show's answer is yes. You can be wrong about yourself for an entire lifetime. And the way you find out you were wrong is usually through the people you love, through what you're willing to do and what you're not, through the moments when the story and the truth come apart in your hands and you have to decide, finally, which one you're going to hold on to. That's Dexter. That's the whole thing, really. There's more to come in the franchise, more Dexter in New York, more of Dexter's world being filled in through Resurrection and other spin-offs, with a previously planned Harrison series having been shelved. Whether all of it is necessary or whether some of it might have been better left to suggestion, I genuinely don't know. But I'm curious to find out, which is more than can be said for some things. And that's the measure of it, really. Approximately 20 years from the first episode, across 8 seasons, 3 different endings, multiple showrunners, and tie-in books that none of the television remembered, this is still a story people want to know the next chapter of. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. Part of what makes that persistence interesting is that it's not nostalgia driving it, not entirely. People didn't come back for new blood out of mere affection for a character they remembered fondly. They came back because the original ending left something unresolved that felt important to resolve. And then they stayed because the new material gave them something to think about rather than just something to feel. That's the mark of a story that was always about more than its plot. Something underneath the plastic wrap and the blood slides that kept asking a question and kept being worth asking. The question, if you want to put it simply, is this: what are you responsible for? and the show's answer, arrived at slowly across 20 years of television through deaths and resurrections and endings and re-endings, is more than you think. Always more than you think. For tonight, though, I hope this was a good few hours. Whether you've watched every episode multiple times and spent most of tonight thinking of things I didn't mention, or you're relatively new to the whole thing, I hope the company was pleasant. This is the kind of show that rewards spending time with it, thinking it over, letting the questions it asks sit with you a bit rather than demanding immediate answers. Get some rest. The dark passenger can rest too. The blood is dry, the plastic wrap is long gone. The Miami sun is someone else's problem now. The light is coming up over whatever city you're in, eventually, though not yet, hopefully, not yet. There's still a little darkness left. Use it well, rest well. This show asked a lot of questions and answered most of them in his own time, and tonight we followed along with it through all of them. That's a good evening's work. Sweet dreams wherever you are tonight.